Chapter 9. At the end of 3 weeks, Joe came home. His arms went around her. She didn't realize she could be so happy to see anybody. It was as if he had been dead and dragged up from the floor of the sea, and alive after all. He was strength and solidity. His embrace was like a steel hoop. She couldn't stand any closer to him. "Miss me, Barb? I just came back to life the minute you walked in." He laughed. "Sit yourself down and see what I've got for you." He emptied the boxes in front of her, things of fluff and froth and color. Get a squiz at these. If he had emptied out parcels of diamonds and emeralds, she could not have been more surprised and excited. She didn't know what to say. Pretty words tumbled to her lips, but she couldn't get them out. She couldn't think of them sounding right in her mouth, on her tongue. She was shy. She had never seen such pretty clothes, let alone felt them, and realized they were hers. "You'll look a knockout in them," he said. Barbie couldn't hide her pleasure as she fingered the garments, but she managed to affect a look of disappointment as she glanced at Joe's smiling face. "You don't like me as I am." "I'd like you if you were dressed in bags." "No, you wouldn't. You'd like me in these things all the time, only you never said." "All right," he said. "Into the fire they go." He scooped them up and carried them to the fireplace. "No, Joe, don't." He came back grinning. She watched, trembling with delight. He put the clothes on the table and picked up one article. He held it up by the waist, stretched from hand to hand. It was black silk, and had everything: orange lace hems, peachy hibiscus flower on each leg, lace insets down the sides. "Joe, what a lovely tea cozy," Barbie said. Joe said. Barbie laughed. She said boldly, "Joe, they're humdingers. I'll put them on and think of you." "I'd rather you thought of me when you took them off," he said, instantly shaping up in mock defense and grinning. Barbie laughed. "Joe, that's not like you." Joe blushed too then. He clapped his hands together. "You know why I bought all these things, don't you? For a special occasion, a real occasion. Look." He pulled a little box out of his pocket. There was a ring in it, a wheel of diamonds, the best that money could buy, he said. Barbie swallowed. "You did mean it." She said teasingly, "Holy Moses, blow me down. You take some convincing." "Didn't I tell you? What did you think? I was only stringing you, wouldn't come back, get tied up to some piece in town. It crossed my mind," she said. But the thought had been a real fear, now and again. "Didn't think I went in just to get a busted foot fixed, did you? You pup. I've been all the way to Adelaide. You believe in sweeping a person off their feet, don't you?" He looked concerned. "Barbie, don't tell me I made a mistake. I meant everything I said to you." He moved towards her. "Why, crikey, I took it for granted, I thought." "You thought right, Joe," Barbie said softly. He pulled her against him, laughing. Then he held her at arm's length. "And listen, honeymoon. We are not having any honeymoon here. But where? Listen. You listening? Oh boy, I could gobble you up right now. Listen, you don't want any honeymoon in the city. No, in no damn towns. No," she didn't know what he was getting at. "No bloody fear. We're going to have a honeymoon away from people, by ourselves, the way it ought to be. Listen, moonlight. That's where we're going. What do you say?" Moonlight by ourselves. She knew exactly what he meant. Yes, yes, that'll be lovely. And you can wear that clobber just for the occasion. We'll shoot into the Holy Joe next week. I was talking to him. He's fixing up everything. Barbie couldn't say anything. The moment was too big for words. She could only hold him tight. She could only tell him in a whisper, "I'm glad it's soon." "As Joe McCara is my name," he cried, "I'm the luckiest cow unhung." At first many people on the field thought it was a strange place to go for a honeymoon, and chaffed Joe and Barbie about it. They laughed and told Joe not to get drunk on the lashons of booze at Moonlight. They told Barbie to be sure and get a bridal suite at the best hotel there. Miss Mooney, Puddin's mother, thought the idea romantic. It would have done her, she said heartily. Me and Wall went to the pictures for our honeymoon. She laughed. We had chocolates and fizz drinks and held hands and laughed like Billy O in the wrong places. We went home and got to work on Puddin'. It was good-o, but half your luck, Barbie. It'll be just lovely for you there together on your own. Those who could dubbed in, and Mickey Kerrigan gave a speech and made the presentation, a wallet of notes. The assemblage sang, for they are jolly good fellows. Barbie felt strange and self-conscious in the fashionable clothes, but the women stared and sincerely told her she looked real nice. Joe said he wouldn't call the Queen his aunt, not with Barbie around. Somebody chalked the words "done for" on the back of the Ford, and somebody else tied a string of old shoes and boots to the rear bumper. The flivver, packed with holiday gear, rattled away over the red sand hills. They pitched their tent in the main street, only it was green with grass now. They looked in at the old store, its walls rough and colored like the skin of a crocodile. It was falling down, no windows, no doors. The bats camped in it, and the spiders. It was chinked with light everywhere. And the draughts made a sound in there that air makes when blown across the mouth of a bottle. This was Moonlight, and it was no more than a dip in the land, a gully running up into the hills, a creek slinking south. Once the gully was white with tents like mushrooms, and the creek alive with men, panning and cradling. There were roaring miners in moleskins and red shirts, and gay women come from the city to sell their souls to them. Now there was nothing, but there was still the bloom of the plum on the hills, and the creek like a sovereign in the sun, and the ghost gums. There was the blue smoke going up from their fire, and the smell of bacon and fragrant wood. There was the moon shining in the dusk, a toe-cap of light, and the stars quickening everywhere. To Barbie, the greenness and coolness of the place was a haven from the sunlight she had been used to all her life. She vaguely knew its history. It was called after George Moonlight, not by that man himself, for he was never in the country, but by a mate of his, another New Zealand West Coaster called Johnny Flyround, who came to Australia, lost an ear in a brawl at Ballarat, trekked interstate with a swag and a whippet dog, and found gold at this place. The great George Moonlight, the gold scout of others, was dead of exposure in Cow Gully, in the Buller country, and here Johnny Flyaround honored him with a nameplate on a field of gold. "Barbie," Joe called from the tent. "What are you doing out there?" "I'm just washing the plates, Joe." "Leave them and come in here." "In a minute." "No minute about it. Come in here or I'll come out and get you." Barbie went into the tent. She sat down on a box. He was lying on the mattress under the blanket, chinning it. There was an expression of intense irritation and impatience on his face. She had been teasingly fobbing him off for the last 3 hours since they arrived. The expression melted. He thought he understood. He crawled out of the bed and knelt before her. He said gently, "What's the matter, sweetheart? Don't you feel well?" "I feel terrible," Barbie gulped. He unbuttoned her blouse. "What is it? Come on, tell old Joe." She looked at him gravely. Her lips trembled. "Joe, it's just that I do so much want you not to be disappointed in me." "That makes 2 of us," Joe said encouragingly. Barbie smiled. I'll just have to be myself, Joe, but I hope it'll be all right." She had seen storms like him. He was the way a storm is before it breaks. He bit her ears and lips. He did not hurt her. She put her teeth in his brown throat. But she didn't bite. She held them there, on the flesh, like a soft-mouthed dog. "You're a savage," he breathed. "A savage I want to try and tame, and never succeed in taming." For her it was a sight of heaven, a rapturous illumination, an experience that had no analogy. The sweat was water in the groove of his spine, a puddle for her fingers. He smelt good, the good, clean smell of a man. And that was the physical. The rest was the utter ecstasy of possession. "This beating heart, it beats for me," she thought. "I power these powerful thrusting loins. In me is the reason for all this, helpless strength and motion, and all his sensations of delight. And this maker of my joy, this is my husband, the one I love. The father of my children to come, and I own him. I own him, he is mine, and mine alone." She saw the white roof of the tent, and the shadow of a sapling across it. There was the night wind, and the night sounds. There was a fox barking in the ranges, and the cry of a curlew. This is a wilderness, and a man is loving me, and I am loving him. This man is Adam, and this place is paradise. There is no one else in the world. There is only me and him, and one blood between us, one key and a lock, and one bridge of flesh. This was a great happiness, and greater still because she knew then that she was a woman too, as other women are. Joe mumbled in a lull of drowsiness, "Barbie, you just go on being yourself. That'll do me." "Oh, Joe, I'm glad I kept myself for you." "Am I the first?" "Well, of course, am I." He turned and held her close. "No," he said, "but you're the best. The others meant nothing to me. They were like a feed when you're hungry and drink when you're thirsty. What am I then?" "You're something I've got for good, and something I want, more than anything else in the world." "Oh, Joe, I'm sure you've given me a baby." "Quintuplets for sure," Joe mumbled sleepily. She laughed. "Oh, Joe, whatever would we do?" "Look like me, drown 'em. Look like you, keep 'em and love 'em. A girl, a little girl, I'd like, fat and pink like a Kewpie doll. I want to dress her and comb her hair and hear her laugh and see the little white teeth in her mouth like milky corn when I tell her stories." She was talking to herself. He breathed deeply in sleep. She felt a tenderness of compassion for him. She knew she could never leave him, not for anything. He could beat her. He could starve her. She would never leave him, and yet it might have been so different. The other one, it could be his body lying there beside her. It could have been his passion and his life in her now. She put away the thought in self-disgust as disloyal and unworthy. She lay awake for a long time. Just outside was a tree full of birds, sleeping and talking, cheeping in good Australian, her father used to say. The light and dark were tides, ebbing and flowing, and they came and went with the tides. Into a tree at nightfall, squabbling for positions, fussing and fidgeting all through, out again at daybreak, singing for a throatful of sunshine. She listened to them now. "Chirk," said one. "Same to you," said another. "Move over, Mug. Get down a bit." "Aw, shut up, and let a bird get a bit of sleep." "Cow of a perch this." "Change trees tomorrow. That's a moral." "Biggest worm I ever caught. Fair dinkum." "Pull your skull in. You're having a nightmare." "Get your feathers out of my moosh. Damn you." "Burk, bork, peek." Barbie laughed aloud, and Joe stirred, and mumbled something about what was tickling her. "Chirk, peek," Barbie said, snuggling up to him, ready for sleep. It was only a fortnight's honeymoon, but Barbie knew she would never forget it. They were back only 3 days when someone told Joe he'd barged into Billy Lomas's hut and dragged him out like a child, cuffing his head and swearing at him. People came. Lomas didn't want to fight. He kept saying, "I was lit, Joe, lit mad. I didn't know what I was doing." It did him no good. He had to fight. He swung wildly, full of fury and desperation. He didn't stand a chance. Joe cut him to pieces, and he fell in the dust, crumpled as if he had been shot. Nobody moved among the onlookers, not even the women, only Barbie. She knelt down and lifted Billy Lomas's head up. Blood was coming out of his mouth. Dust had gone thick and black in the blood on his face. The face was bruised, and one eye swelled. Joe said, "Leave the bastard alone." He said it with anger still hot in him. "Or does he mean something to you?" She turned on him a piercing, affronted look. "He doesn't mean anything to me, Joe. But you'd do this for a dog." "Not that kind, you wouldn't." "You beat him," she said. "He's paid. It's finished. You're a man. Pick him up and carry him in there." "I'll be damned if I will," Joe said, but she knew he saw it the way she did. "If you don't, Joe, I will." She tried to raise Lomas, but knew she couldn't. Joe said roughly, "Look out of the bloody way." He carried Lomas into his hut, and helped Barbie to wash his face and patch him, though his features were thunder and he grumbled all the time. "Who told you, Joe?" "I heard," he said. She knew he wasn't going to reveal the pimp's name. "They had no right," she said. "They had every right," he retorted. "And you had an obligation. You should have told me. Who wants trouble? There's enough of it without making it. Why let a skunk get away with murder? Why don't we forget it now?" The rage was going down in him, dying in scuds and lippers of abuse. "He could have done you harm. By Christ, if he had, I'd have killed him." He stalked out as Billy Lomas came to, moaning. Barbie stayed with him. That night, lying in bed, Joe McCara told Barbie they were going away. He said it quite bluntly and even challengingly, Barbie thought. Any remarks he expected from her did not come. She knew when to listen. He went on, building reasons for his decision. He said there was nothing secure on the field. A man worked his guts out, he said. Maybe he struck it good, and maybe he didn't. He could do a starve, and then he could eat like a king, but there could be too much starving in between eating like a king. There wasn't any point in going down a hole in the earth and pulling dirt, and lying on your side with nothing in your nose but candle grease or the smell of carbide, and scrabbling away with your pick, watching for the colors till your eyes ached, and coming out and going home in the hot afternoon with nothing but a weak grumbling in your insides and hope for tomorrow. No point at all, he said. When you can beware, you could work the day around and make your hands and your sweat pay you. Barbie just said quietly, "Yes, Joe." He was riled by the indefinite tone. "Don't you want to leave?" he snapped. She wanted to tell him all he said was true, but it was a living, and she didn't mind. And she wanted to remind him that he was keen on opal mining, and besides, he was lucky at it. He had made an extra good strike, and although the seam petered out, there was always the chance of him making a big cleanup. And her own claim was making better than wages, not much, but better. And she wanted to assure him that he didn't have to worry about her, and suggest that Lomas himself might go away now after what happened to him. But all she said was, "I go wherever you go, Joe." She looked sideways at him and saw his strong jaw, and the curved eye well open, shining though it was dim. "Rabbits did pay better than this," he went on, still arguing with his decision. "And dogging. Anything. We'll give it a go." "All right, Joe." He was silent for a moment. "I know you've got associations here, Barbie, your father and all that, but we can always come back sometime." "Sure." He turned at the behest of his feelings, lips to her ear. "Ah, Barbie," he confided, "I feel a bit ashamed." "Whatever for?" "Doing my block today. Not for what I did, but doing my block like that. It's a weakness. I'm sorry if I'm grumpy, and I am grumpy as hell." "Well, that's easily fixed," Barbie told him, brushing his lips with hers. "I've got just the cure for grumpy men." He went to her resistlessly. They left a week later. They had no set plan, beyond staying in Pernambuco for the carnival. Joe had nominated himself for the wood chopping contest. After that, they would make up their minds where to go from there.